Hey everyone, we are back with another Metro Siege update video, and by we, I mean with me as always is Corey. Say hi, Corey.
Hey, how's it going?
So let's jump into Metro Siege. The first important news, it is now quite official, unless some major thing happens to postpone it or something. Metro Siege will be back on Amiga Bill on the 23rd of this month, so it's only a matter of days away. This time it's not going to be Corey and myself, it's going to be Alex Brown, the programmer of Metro Siege, and John Tsakiris, the musician, co-game level designer, and additional pixel artist for Metro Siege. So he's wearing all the hats for Metro Siege, but they're both going to be there with the newest build of the game, and this is finally a chance for the public to see all this progress that's actually been in game for a really long time. So finally they're going to be able to see the complete level 1, including the level 1 boss intro, the boss fight, the boss outro, and how that very smoothly transitions. Then they'll finally get to see the full subway platform level as it is now, with those built-in cinematics where it scrolls ahead to show you that Bob is still there running away and then following him into the train. And then they'll be able to see level 3, which is incomplete but good enough to show the general public. It's got the enemies in there, it's got the full parallax, the foreground scene, and even the animated tiles, making those scared passengers not just static kind of cardboard cutouts. And on my screen here is a fun video to switch topics now into Metro Siege progress. This is a video I made just for Alex Brown, the programmer. So if you recall, every level of Metro Siege is really carefully hand programmed to handle getting parallax and more colors on the screen in a really specific way for the design of that particular level. That's kind of what has to be done if you want as close to console and arcade quality game on Amiga, where you want levels to be quite different from each other in like layers of scrolling and stuff like that, because it doesn't have a really viable built-in system like the Mega Drive. Its dual playfield mode is very strong. You can easily parallax both layers. You could even parallax tile columns vertically, which is pretty crazy. Very easy to do animated tiles, and each layer can use a lot of colors. Each tile could be 16 colors, but I think each tile could also use any of the 4 16 color palettes.
So yeah, it's all 16 colors in each of those palettes. When you're a pixel artist dealing with so few colors, it is an insane amount of colors.
So yeah, so that's one of, if you guys recall, for OCS and ECS Amiga, which Metro Siege works on, if we actually tried to use real dual playfield mode to get that parallax scrolling, we would be limited to 7 colors for the background and 7 colors not only for the foreground, but since the Amiga OCS and ECS has very limited sprite abilities, therefore we can't use sprites for the characters, those 7 colors for the foreground graphics would also not only have to cover all background environment, or I should say foreground environment art, but the characters themselves would all have to be made out of the same 7 colors. Obviously we did not want to go that way, so we have to be really clever with using the limited sprite abilities in much more tricky ways to create the illusion of entire back and front layers beyond the regular play area, so to speak, or play layer. And so this is a great example of some of the tricks we're going to be using. So usually we use a repeating sprite trick, and you just have, like, let's say 48 or 64 pixel width to keep repeating and tiling across the screen, so you could make a little city skyline, which is what we did for level 1. Usually that skyline is blocked by the big buildings in the front, so you only see little pieces of it at a time, so you don't notice so much that it's a really tiled repeating pattern. So that's one way to handle it. But another way to handle it is to use the copper coprocessor to color change the same few colors and create these bands. So what I figured out for this level, we can have bigger background buildings that are very wide and less tall for this industrial area. This is like the industrial warehouse docks kind of area. The great thing is the illusion is created by negative space. So the sprites are actually what creates the divide between buildings. So this negative space where you see the side of the building in air, you see the sky, that's actually the solid object. And the rest is just these bands that go across the entire screen in the background. The cool thing with the Amiga sprites is you can reuse the same sprite at different vertical positions for different things and even scroll them at different speeds. So we can offset the same sprite that's used to divide the buildings and use it as chimneys and antenna and stuff like that. And then we can use some additional sprites to do smokestack smoke and stuff like that. So that's the trick we're using for level 4. So progress-wise, the point is, I made this video and I made quite a long time ago the mock-up for this, and I've actually made placeholder assets, the full tile map, all the sprites required. It's not fully cleaned up yet, but the important thing is to explain how I imagine it to work to Alex, to get him to get it working, and that way I haven't wasted a ton of time cleaning up art yet that might have to be totally changed if Alex comes back and says, hey, you know what, I understand what you wanted to do, but you're trying to use too many sprites, or it's using too much processor time to do all this stuff. So it's always good to make sure it works before you spend a ton of time perfecting art that you would then have to totally redo or scrap and just come up with something else if it's not going to work. But the good news is I broke it up into the parts. Alex already has it largely working in-game with the placeholder art, and because of that really awesome online build system that Alex created for us, I can keep cleaning up and updating the art for the environment, just make a new build and make sure it's all looking the way it should once all the component pieces interact with the code, with all the sprites and the color changes. That's what I've been working on. Now I can start cleaning up level 4, and as you've seen before, the designs for the enemies, they're dock workers slash gangsters. They've been designed visually, but they haven't been animated yet. So I actually started creating their retro animator made by Eric Holgan. Thank you again very much, Eric.
I really appreciate the color scheme and everything you've come up with this, and I think it's a decent amount further along than the last time I saw it. So
yeah, and once it's all scrolling and working together, it's going to be beautiful. The other thing that this particular mock-up is missing, I'm going to try to work in. I mean, you can see part of it here with this cast shadow, but as the game progresses, the game is actually progressing from early daytime to nighttime by the end of the game to have that especially cinematic feeling. So this is a bit darker than the first couple of levels, and I really want that long cast shadow. Here from the alleyway, it's going to be brighter lit, the sidewalk and the road, in a diagonal. Like the sun is back there but pretty low, and so the buildings are casting long shadows across the road. But you have to keep it subtle enough that the player doesn't go, oh, that looks weird. When the player walks into the shadow, he doesn't darken. So you can't make it like super extreme, but you can have it in there enough so that it creates a really nice atmosphere. And once I get these animation files of the thugs and Alex gets those into the game, it'll be the same situation. I can keep updating the art and animations and get those thugs polished up as well. And then the other cool thing, finally, this is level 4. This is the first level where we're going to start introducing much more sophisticated enemies who will be able to roll on the ground as well if they're knocked down. So suddenly those moves you could do where you jump up and you do a knee drop or an elbow drop onto them, suddenly that becomes a much bigger risk for the player because they might roll out of the way and you might slam your knees or elbow down on the cement and hurt yourself. Same thing with blocking and counterattacking. So the first few levels, I mean, the boss fights are moderately difficult in the first 2 boss fights, but this is where the game starts to really ramp up. It says, okay, you've learned the basics now, you know how to counter and stuff, but now the enemies are going to be able to start doing it too. You're dealing with tougher foes now. So you're going to have to start learning which enemies are likely to be able to block or counter certain things that you do. So you have to always be mindful. And quite likely, I'm thinking of actually giving one of the thugs a special pose he goes into, just like how the players do when you initiate block. So I'll make the character go into a special pose every once in a while if you're close to them, and that'll be another visual reminder. Don't try to attack him with a normal punch right now, because you're going to get your ass handed to you, or you're going to get counterattacked, basically. So that's really, those things are really going to start to add a lot of sophistication and keep things interesting. This is not one of your typical games that almost all of them suffer as the levels progress. It's just more line up and button mash. And in general, typically the way they made enemies harder was give them more hit points and give them kind of unfair moves that hurt you more. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
But in the case of Metro Siege, they're actually going to become more sophisticated enemies that you have to be more mindful of what you're doing. You can't just keep jump kicking them all the time or line up and button mash before they do. So that should really help allow us to keep things challenging and creative. But that is, I think that's everything for Metro Siege as well.
If you enjoy our content and want to keep up to date on our games, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, if you want to support our projects, consider becoming a patron. The link's in the description, and we'll see you soon.